guys, it's Jen. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another video. So today I am excited to be sharing with you how to make a homemade apple pie. I am of the mindset that if you can make a homemade pie in the kitchen, then you can do anything. So don't be afraid. I'm going to show you step by step how to make apple pie along with a homemade crust, homemade filling, and it is super delicious. Today's video is also an open collaboration with Mandy from Mandy in the Making. So there will be a whole playlist of fall and holiday recipes for you guys to enjoy. I'll be linking both her channel and the collaboration playlist in the description box below. So after you're done watching my video, make sure that you check out all the other videos that are available to inspire you on your journey this fall and holiday season of making desserts. So let's get into it.
Okay, so we're going to get started on the crust, and I will be typing this recipe out in the description box below if you guys want to try it for yourself. This recipe actually comes from one of my vintage Better Homes and Gardens cookbooks, and it's a recipe for deep dish apple pie. So I'm going to be making my homemade pie crust in my food processor. If you don't have a food processor, don't worry, you can use a pastry cutter for this. It works just fine. I'll link the pastry cutter that I have in the description box below, but basically you're just going to blend together your flour and your salt and your shortening until the mixture is fine and crumbly. You'll see that the shortening gets broken up into like the size of peas and coated with the flour. Now at that point, you're going to add some ice water. Very important that you add ice water. Don't add the chunks of ice, just add the really cold water. That will help your pie crust stay together and keep from getting too soft. If you don't use ice water, it's very hard to roll out. So basically you can just add water until the dough comes together. This recipe is for a double crust, so we'll be making obviously a top and bottom crust for this pie. So once the crust dough is completed, you just turn that out onto your counter and we're going to roll it out. So make sure that you use plenty of flour for this so that your dough doesn't stick. Pretty self-explanatory. I'm just going to sprinkle the dough with flour and make sure that I rub my rolling pin with flour also, and then just keep rolling basically from the center out until you get the piece big enough to cover the bottom of your pie dish. So there's several different ways you can transfer your dough from the counter to the pie plate, but I just like to fold it into quarters and then I place it into the dish and unfold it, and that works pretty well for me. Since this dough has a lot of shortening in it, you definitely do not need to grease your pie plate. I'm using a deep dish glass pie plate. It's my favorite one. It's available online. I'll link it down below. Then just use a paring knife to trim off the excess crust and you can set that aside. So next we're going to work on our apple filling. So apple pie is really very simple. There's not very many ingredients, but the result is delicious. I love making homemade pies and baking. I just feel like it's sort of therapeutic. I love making my own dough. I love rolling it out, similar to when I'm making Christmas cookies. I don't know, it's fun for me. So I have some Granny Smith apples here. You can use a mixture of apples, basically any kind that you'd like. I would recommend using more of a firm apple because this is going to bake in the oven and you don't want your filling to get too mushy. So I'm just using a regular vegetable peeler to get my apples peeled up. I know that there are devices that some people have where you like put the apple in and turn the crank and it will peel the apple. I don't have one of those. I actually don't mind peeling my vegetables and fruits with a potato peeler, whatever, vegetable peeler. And so that's what I'm doing. I would not leave the skin on for this recipe just because I feel like it would affect the texture of the apple filling. So once my apples are peeled, I'm going to just cut the cores out of them and then slice them up really thinly. So for this pie, you'll need about 6 cups of sliced apples. And so I'm just using a bowl that has, measurements on the side of it so that I can easily figure that out. Once all of your apples are peeled and sliced, you can go ahead and complete the rest of the filling. So for the filling, you'll need to add some flour, some ground cinnamon, some allspice, and some sugar, and just mix that all together. When the apples cook in the oven, within the pie crust, they will release a lot of juice. So you definitely don't need to add any liquid to this. And adding the flour to the apples helps the filling thicken. So that's kind of how it works inside of the pie. I know that if you buy like pre-made apple pie filling, which I've never personally bought before, but I've seen others make pies with it, and it's like sort of more runny. When you use fresh apples, you don't have to add any liquid because apples have a lot of water content, obviously, anyway. And as they cook, they will mix with the flour and the sugar and the cinnamon, and it just turns into a delicious appley filling. Okay, so after the filling is mixed up, I'm just going to dump it into the bottom pie crust, making sure that I scrape out all of the flour and sugar from the bowl, and then just arrange your apples as evenly as you can. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is going to be covered with a top crust, and then I do like to pack it down just a little bit to try to get any air or space between the apples out that I can. Now, this part is optional, but I like to do this because I think it makes the filling taste a little bit better. So I'm just taking some small pats of butter and putting those over top of the apples. You don't need that much, probably only a couple tablespoons total, but this will obviously melt down into the apple mixture and make it taste a little bit richer. So now we're going to work on our top pie crust. The only difference with this is that you will need to cut a vent hole in it. So obviously as the pie bakes, it's going to steam up, and you want to make sure that you have somewhere in the top crust for that steam to escape. And so I'm going to roll this out into a circle, and then just find any cookie cutter that you have, like a small cookie cutter. If you don't have one, you could also just use a knife to cut a little circle in the top of the pie. I think it would be really cute also to do like a leaf pattern for fall, or even like a little apple, or maybe a Christmas tree if you were making this for Christmas. But I'm just using this little star cutter, and I'm cutting out 1 hole in the center and then 5 around the pie. I'm just going to fold that into quarters and place it on top of my crust. Easy, right? You guys don't be scared of this. Seriously, it's so fun to bake and make your own homemade baked goods. So after the top is on, I just went ahead and took my paring knife and I'm trimming off the rest. And then I'm just going to take 1 finger on my right hand. You can see 2 fingers on my left hand, and just pinch the pinch the top and bottom pie crusts together. So just go around the pie, pinching it between your fingers, and make sure that it is well sealed so that the top crust will stick together with the bottom crust. And that's basically it. It's super fun. This recipe is very forgiving. I would definitely recommend that you try it if you haven't, made a pie like this before. So I'm also going to take the parts of the pie crust, those little stars that I cut out, and arrange those on top of the pie as well, in between the hole cutouts. It's just something, a little bit decorative that you can do. And then the last step is just to brush this with an egg wash before you put it in the oven. This will make sure that your pie crust gets nice and brown and pretty. I actually could not find my basting brush, so watch as I just take some egg with my clean hands. Yes, I have clean hands and rub the pie down with the egg mixture. So definitely do that if you want to, if you can't find your basting brush like I couldn't at this time. So I'm just going to rub that down with the egg wash, and then we'll get it into the oven. So the recipe calls to bake this in a 375-degree oven for about 45 to 55 minutes. It does say to cover the edges with foil. You just have to know your oven. My oven typically doesn't burn the edges of pie crust, and so I didn't do that. I just put it on a baking tray covered with foil in case anything bubbled over. But here is the completed pie. It's right after I took it out of the oven, so it's still hot and bubbly. So delicious. You guys will see how I served this up with some ice cream, which in my opinion is the only way to eat apple pie. Definitely wait a few hours before cutting into this. And honestly, if you wait until the next day, it will hold its shape much better. So here is how I served it. You guys can see the sliced apples inside there with the super tender pie crust. I just topped it with some vanilla ice cream. We all enjoyed this. The kids did too. So definitely try this recipe. It is so good.
All right, so thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you are no longer afraid, if you were in the beginning, to make a homemade pie in your kitchen. I will see you in my next video. Bye.